Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Sustainable Activism Webinar. This is a special treat. Today we have as our guest and our presenter, Lorrin Maughan, who's going to present about strategies for effective activism, and we'll get into that in a moment. First, I'd like to welcome all of you. Thanks to all the activists for joining us this evening. This program is part of In Defense of Animal Sustainable Activism campaign, our effort to offer emotional and spiritual support for animal activists so that we can continue to do our good work for the animals. We have a few things that we offer. We offer, in addition to the webinars, which are every month, we also offer an animal activist online support group, which happens as well once a month on the fourth Thursday of the month, and we're hoping that many of you will join us on that event. It's a great opportunity just to speak freely and openly about issues that go on in the activist world and receive support for that. So I facilitate those discussions, and I encourage you to sign on to those. It's in the same format, so we do have an opportunity to chat with each other via the chat box and also using the telephone, and it's a great opportunity to really connect. And we also have an animal activist online helpline, which is something that you can tune into either via email or you can use the telephone number, which is 1-800-705-0425. That's a number you can call any day that you're feeling either a little down or you want some support, or even if you'd like to brainstorm new strategies for your activist events and things that you're doing. It's an offering to the animal rights community, and we hope that you'll use it. We have experienced and trained counselors that are available. They are all vegans, they're all animal activists, and many of them are also counselors, coaches, and therapists. So it's a service for you, and we hope that you use it. And let's see, also want to just mention, if you're interested in vegan spirituality, another part of our program, we are having a retreat in Florida featuring the Good Karma Diet author, Victoria Moran, and that will be our first retreat ever in Florida. So we're hoping if you're in the area that you'll join us, and you can find more information about that on our events page as well. I put all of those links in the chat box so you can stay tuned to those things. And I think without any further ado, I would love to introduce Lorrin, who is also one of our counselors on our animal activist helpline. So that's another very important part of her role with us at In Defense of Animals, and we greatly appreciate her support in that. So Lorrin, so Lorrin is a vegan activist. She's also a Reiki master and life coach whose former corporate career included, among other things, sales and consumer marketing for Fortune 100 companies. She now works with individuals facing burnout and overwhelm to reconnect them with their passion for building a better world in ways that enable them to continue making a difference in positive, healthy, and sustainable ways. Lorrin coaches by phone and Skype and also offers in-person equine guided experiences in partnership with Gift, a talented equine coach and healer. So you can reach Lorrin on her website, which is LorrinMaughan.com. So I placed that into the chat box as well, so you can take a peek at that. So Lorrin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, we'll just repeat the title of your webinar for us in full, because I gave just a piece of it, which is about strategies. But I think it's really helpful to get the full picture.
Okay, I've called it Winning Friends and Influencing People, Strategies for Effective Activism.
Yay! So that's what we're all in store for today, and I'm very much looking forward to this myself. I will let you know, for all of our listeners and also viewers, I will drop off with my face, but I'll still be here in spirit guiding the call. So that means if you have any concerns, you can put it into the chat box. Let me know, I can't hear this, any technical issues, I'm here to help support with those types of issues. And the first part of our time together in the webinar will be more of a listening time where it's a listen-only mode. And then at the end of that, after Lorrin's done sharing with us, she has a PowerPoint presentation she's also going to share. At the end of that, we will move into a question and answer mode where people will be able to either through their phone or chat some questions to Lorrin. So we have that opportunity as well. So thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Lisa. All right. So what I'm going to do first is I am going to load up the slides, and I'm actually going to share out a download link. So if you're having trouble looking at them while we're online, hopefully that will help as well. You can actually then just click on the link that you've been shared with and open it on your PC. Okie doke. All right, so winning friends and influencing people, strategies for effective activism. Just a quick overview. A little bit about me. I've worked for some pretty large corporations, luckily had some really great experiences. In my corporate life, I was working for American Express. I worked for Microsoft, spent about 15 years full time at Microsoft. And in fact, I still do some work with them. And for some of that time, I spent marketing Windows. So Windows is a product that some people love to hate, some people love to love. It tends to be fairly polarizing, right? And that can be some challenges for a marketer, right? You're always facing people who love to hate your product. So same as us, we're always facing people who love to challenge us. So think about it though, there's 1 billion people using Windows, so they must be doing something right? Also spend some time in the corporate world in human resources and in recruiting. So both of those are areas where we really do have to try and coach people through different scenarios, some challenging conversations, things like that. And then after that, went and did coaching. So I spent 2 years going through a very intensive coaching certificate, and absolutely love it. I'm partnered, you can see a little bit here of Gift, my beautiful sweet horse, who is my co-partner in my business. So she coaches with me and has just an amazing capacity to help people get in touch with their values and heal themselves. So some really fun stuff that I've had in my career that has kind of, as I've become more and more of an activist, has become more, I guess there's that trendy word right now, it's just intersectionality, right? You look at the relationships between social justice issues. I look at the relationships between business and activism, and I think there are so many parallels that we can learn from. So I'd like to share some of them with you today. FYI, I don't know everything, okay? So as a coach, I tend to be a coactive coach. So we work together to co-create a future. I'm not some guru who knows everything, who's going to tell you what to do. I'm going to suggest some strategies, give you my perspective. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then, we can always work together to find something else that does work. Or as you get more clear on your values, you'll find something that resonates with you. So here is a great quote from a classic book. Tomorrow you may want to persuade somebody to do something. Before you speak, pause and ask yourself, how can I make this person want to do it? And that's something that I think we all need to remind ourselves sometimes, is how do we make people want to help the animals? People want to go vegan. People want to save the planet. How do we make them want it? And part of that is thinking about how we persuade. So generally, populations tend to distribute themselves along a curve. We call it the distribution curve. And in any group of people on any particular issue, you'll find that they kind of distribute themselves with outliers. So you tend to have, say, about 15% of any given population on one end of the issue, extreme on one end, right? So maybe very much 4. And on the other side of the continuum, you have about 15% of the population, very much against. Okay, so you've got those kind of very vocal elements on either end of that continuum. But the bulk of people in any given population tend to clump in the middle. And so you got 70% of the population sitting in this spot, not really committed too far either way. And of course, they do distribute themselves along that continuum at some points. You may find some of them shifting a little bit more to one side, some of them shifting a little bit more to the other. But what we want to do when we're thinking about some of our, and Christine's asking, is this in all cultures and populations or just Western? Good question. I believe it's a statistical distribution. So it tends to be culture agnostic. And it's just if you get a big enough group of people together, they tend to spread themselves out that way. So the point here is a couple of things. First of all, where do we spend our energy as activists? You know, do we focus on that small but very vocal population right at one end of the continuum? Or do we try and move people in the middle along to the side of the continuum that we support most? And so we're talking, you know, I'm talking kind of your average person, right? Your average person. And in this conversation, you know, I'm from a Western background. I live in the US. So most of my experience will be along communicating with Westerners. Some of it, you know, there are ways that we can adjust when we work with people from other cultures. But what I'm looking at today is very much around pragmatism rather than ideology. And I'm looking at how do we shift those people in the middle? How do we shift the most kind of non-committal, but not invested either way? How do we shift them to our end of the continuum? So while I absolutely support the whole spectrum of activism, so that involves all actions that we take towards our ideal, and I know that you and I probably don't fall right in the middle of that continuum, a lot of the people we talk to do. And so that's where I want to appeal to people, okay? And I just want to share a little story here. This is actually an activity, this tug of war thing, that we do in some corporate training that I've done, and I still do it. And what it is we basically replicate this. So we'll get people in the class, we'll give them a rope, and we'll have about 15% of them on either end of the rope, right? And we'll have the rest of them all clumped in the middle holding the rope. And we say to the people on either end, okay, your job is to pull this group of people over to your end of the room, right? And you go on the other side, you get them on your end of the room. And so 1, 2, 3, go. And they start pulling and pulling and pulling. People's faces get red, right? They're putting in a lot of energy. And what invariably happens is the people in the middle are standing there, all nonchalant, maybe 2 fingers on the rope, holding it lightly, whatever, not expending much energy at all. And nothing is moving. Nobody's going anywhere, right? And I've tried it different ways. I've had really big, burly rugby players on either end of the rope. I've had small people on one end and big people on the other end. It doesn't matter. It doesn't go anywhere every single time. And so that makes me think, okay. So there are 2 times that stand out when I've done this recently, where, first of all, people are pulling and pulling and pulling. They notice nothing's changing. And somebody on one end of the rope goes, it's not working. And they do something different. So in one case, somebody on the end of the rope started walking in a circle around the group. And all of a sudden, people had to shift to keep in balance, right? And so that was interesting. In another group of people, salespeople, interestingly enough, somebody on the end of the rope said, we're putting all this energy in, nothing's happening. So he reaches into his pocket and he pulls out a $20 bill. And he goes, who's going to come over to my end of the rope for $20? Of course, they're salespeople. They're incentivized by that. But the takeaway from those kinds of responses to this activity are something that we can all learn from. And those are, first of all, if something's not working, try something different. And second of all, if something's not working in terms of your persuasion, find out what's important to the people that you're trying to move and help motivate them with that, with what's important to them. And so I just want us to kind of keep that in mind as a backdrop when we're thinking about what we're doing as activists. How do we find out what motivates them so that we can encourage them to lean towards that, right? And there's always something that we can find in common with another human being. So just another point here is that when I'm talking about this, I'm kind of taking concepts from business. So I'm very much focused on pragmatism, right? I want to take a very practical approach to my activism. I am an idealist, and I need to balance that with pragmatics. Pragmatic is actually a word that comes from the Greek word pragma, which is deed or do. So it describes the philosophy of doing what works best. And so that's a really important concept for me. It's like I need to know that when I am being an activist, that I'm being an effective activist. I want to do what works best. And that's going to help me reach my ideal of a better world. So when we think about how are marketing and activism similar? Well, a goal of activism is to persuade people to change their perceptions and subsequently their actions, right? To persuade people to change their perceptions and subsequently their actions. Guess what else does that? Marketing, right? So we're trying to do it to make a better world. They're trying to do it to make more money, right? So I think we'll win in the end. But, look at it. We're trying to shift perceptions. We're trying to shift people away from the assumptions that they've held for most of their life. We're trying to move people towards being advocates for our cause, supporters of a better world. We want them to be loyal. So we don't just want them to spike up and say, oh my goodness, this is a cause, I have to support it. And then 2 weeks from now, it's too hard, right? We want to build loyalty, stickiness, connection, right? And ultimately, we want to influence their purchasing and their consumption behavior. We want them to think about, what is it that I'm buying? What is it that I'm eating? What are my dollars paying for, right? How is this supporting this important thing, right? So we really are pretty similar, and that's why I wanted to talk to you about this today. So, not quite sure. I have a little thing on my screen, but that should actually be the marketers there is crossed out. So, what our mission as activists, right, as marketers / activists for our cause, for the animals, right? We want to understand our audience, right? If we think about it, the key tenets to success as a marketer start with understanding and connection, right? Millions of dollars in large corporations are spent analyzing the audience, right? Understanding why they make the decisions they make, what's important to them, what do they value, who are they influenced by, right? And we can actually take it away and think about that as well. How do we understand the people that we're trying to influence? What is important to them? What do they value? Who influences them, right? So we can't browbeat somebody into changing their behavior. We can't force them or bully them. First of all, bullying is not a good thing to do. So, but if we keep forcing people and basically shoving them down a path that we want them to walk down, all we do is we build up potentially, if they're going to comply, it'll be a grudging compliance. And what we'll notice is that as soon as the cat's away, the mouse will play. All right. And they'll revert at the first chance they get. So what we need to do is what we want them to do is buy into this vision for a better world, right? And we want that to be a vision that aligns with both their values and their needs. And we'll talk a little bit about this in a minute, but values and needs, right? People have values, but they also have needs that might conflict. And as a coach, I find this a lot in the conversations that we have is why are you doing this, right? How is it working for you? What is it supporting in you? And oftentimes when there's the most angst in somebody, it's because the value that they hold is not aligned with the action that they're taking to meet a need, right? And so what we want to do is help people align those, help them discover a path to a better world, right? And then help them make the decision to go there, right? So when people think that something's their idea, if they own it as their idea, right? They've made the connections themselves. They've made the decision themselves, and it resonates with something in their heart. Then they're far more likely to act on that and support it than if it's somebody else's idea that they should do, right? So what we want to do is understand the people very, very well. We want to be strategic. And this is something that I say to myself a lot. It's not about you. It's not about you. Lorrin, it's not about me. It's not about it's not about whether or not I can convince somebody. It's about them. It's about the animals, right? So I have to remind myself often, it's like, take that ego off and leave it at the door, right? This is not about you. We want to focus on outcomes and results. So we want to be very action oriented, very results driven, right? If we're doing something, what's that definition of insanity, right? Doing something repeatedly and getting the same results, right? So if we want to change how people are accepting our message, then maybe we change how we deliver it. Maybe we change how we relate to them. We want them to co-create this new future with us. We want them to buy into this vision, right? We want them to relate to stories. How can they feel good about themselves? How can they be a part of this new Xanadu, right? And we'll talk a little bit about this word contagious in a minute, because I want us to be what I call consciously contagious. So being very clear about what we're spreading around, right? What kind of viral impact we want to have. We want to be very conscious about it. So a lot of this starts with, how do I show up in the world? How am I living my values? How am I sharing my values? How's that working for me? How am I getting the results that I need? And if I'm not, am I adjusting? Am I shifting? Or am I just talking louder, right? You know those people who you don't speak your language, and so you go, I'm sorry, I don't understand you. And so they just talk louder at you, right? That's sometimes what we do as activists. Instead of saying, how else can I communicate this in a way that they're going to understand, that's going to help them? And the other thing, I actually had this feedback from some friends of mine on social media, that they are often frustrated by things that activists do because there's no call to action. It's not clear to them what they're being asked to do. What specific action are they being asked to take? What are they specifically being asked to change, right? So what we want to do, and this is actually a concept that I've taken from working with animals, is how can we make it easy for them to make the right decision, right? Not necessarily about punishing them for making the wrong one. How do we make it easy for them to make the right one, right? And then when we do that, giving them the freedom to find their own path that aligns with that. Yeah, Karina, that's exactly what your dog trainer just told you. Make it easy, right? Anybody who's ever worked with horses and has looked at a Buck Brannaman movie or Buck Brannaman training, he does the same thing. He's like, they don't want to go and do bad things intentionally, right? Nor do people really. I mean, apart from some, but the majority of us, the ones in the middle, we just want to make it easy for them to make the right decision, right? So when we think about strategy, how are we changing perception? How are we changing behavior, right? How do we sometimes, when we're thinking about, okay, let me be a little bit more aware of how I'm showing up in the world, do I sometimes get overrun with emotion and indulge my need for expression, or indulge my need for outrage, or for some kind of immediate validation or immediate release? Or am I being strategic about this? Right? And I'm not saying don't feel emotion. Feel it. Be passionate about the cause, right? Be authentic. There's nothing wrong with crying when you see something painful, right? But when we want to help take action, right, then we want to shift how we do things, use our passion for the best possible outcome. So when we stop and ask ourselves, what is the most effective response in this situation, in any given situation, right? I think my camera just stopped working. Hang on a second. Apologize for that. So be passionate about your cause. Follow your heart, but take your brain with you. Right? So not sure what's happened with my camera, but I'm going to keep talking anyway. So be outraged, but be strategic about it, right? They say that revenge is a dish served best cold. I think the same applies to activism, that sometimes we need to take ourselves out of the heat of the moment and think about, okay, what is the most effective response to this situation for the animals, not for me, for the animals.
Lorrin, this is
Yes.
Lisa, just coming in here for a moment. You might try to turn off the webcam and then turn it on again and see if that would resolve it.
Yep, just tried that.
Okay.
And didn't.
Okay. Well, it's okay.
As long as you guys can still hear me, we'll just keep going.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. And you can still see the slides, right?
Right now we're on strategic. That's the slide that we have.
Perfect. Yep, that's the one I've got. Good. Okay, great. So, so about that ego thing, take it out, right? Remove it. Don't take stuff personally. Remember that when somebody gets angry or defensive, it's because you've hit a nerve. And when you've hit a nerve, that's a good thing, because that means that you've planted a seed, right? They're angry or defensive for a reason, because they know that there's something wrong. And so welcome that. Welcome the disagreement, right? Be compassionate too, right? Because you know that when you've made somebody defensive or angry, you've hurt them, right? And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that you've been horrible. It's just that remember when you first started shifting. Remember when you first started making the change, and how painful that was, right? Because what you've just done is you've said everything about your life, everything about your culture, everything about your family, everything about all the things you've learned and how you've identified yourself. That might not be right. And that's very confronting to people. So when they are angry and defensive, have some compassion for them, right? And remember, this is not about you. It's not even about them. It's about the animals. All right. So one of our biggest focuses as marketers is, how do we win hearts and minds, right? And it's a delicate balance, because both of those things work for us and against us, right? So I'll give you an example right now, right? I'm assuming most of you are familiar with Freddie, who escaped from a slaughterhouse truck in New Jersey not too long ago, and ran amok and was finally captured and taken to a sanctuary. Beautiful little guy. He's so sweet. And so we see this on social media quite frequently, right? The little piggy jumping out of the truck, or the calf who manages to get away, or the cow who escapes, right? And the amazing determination and courage and just absolute grit that these animals have to escape. And we see how that captures the public imagination, right? And we go, what? Why is it that you're all so caught up in this fabulous one little being who's, been rescued and he's avoided a terrible end? But wait a second, what about all the other cows and pigs and chickens and other people on the truck, right? What happens to all of their fellow creatures in feedlots? And so we get angry, right? We're all like, oh, why do they do that? Why can they only focus on the one thing? Well, it's actually a problem with how our brains process information. It's a neurological thing, right? So here's something to think about. There's two things on this slide we're going to talk about. One is that big quote, one death is a tragedy, 1 million is a statistic. That was attributed to a rather nasty piece of work called Joseph Stalin. But he actually made a really good point, right? Research has showed us over and over again that when you show somebody one puppy that was abused, right? When you show them one calf who escaped from a slaughterhouse truck, when you show them one horse from a rescued from the kill pen, people connect with that. They get it, right? When you show them 1 million of them, they don't connect as well. And nonprofits know this. They know that when you start, the bigger the number that you start showing people, the smaller the return in terms of fundraising and donations, right? The smaller the return in terms of volunteering and activism. So that's really interesting. Richard Price here said, the bigger the issue, this is advice for writers, but I think that it goes for everybody. The bigger the issue, the smaller you write. You don't write about the horrors of war. No, you write about a kid's burnt socks lying on the road. You pick the smallest manageable part of the big thing and you walk off the resonance, right? And that's because of two things. One, most people have a real inability to get our heads around huge numbers. We just can't do it. There are very few people who can, right? People like Bill Gates, they have a different brain to the rest of us. They think about numbers differently. For most of us, the bigger the number, the more abstract it gets. And therefore we're less able to relate to it, right? So yes, you and I are profoundly aware of the 9.6 billion animals that died in slaughterhouses last year. We're absolutely painfully aware of it. And to the public, that's just overwhelming, right? They can't really connect with it. It doesn't mean anything to their brains. Statistics strip away the identity of individuals. Okay, I'll repeat that. Statistics strip away the identity of individuals. And that's a really important thing when we're telling stories. The other thing is that huge numbers are overwhelming. So not only are they so abstract that we can't relate to them, but they're overwhelming and they create a sense of helplessness and despair, right? Which is obviously something we actually get a lot, right? You see us as people in the animal activist world, we get overwhelmed. We find a lot of despair. We find a lot of fatigue in those humongous numbers, this overwhelming deluge of tragedy. So when people see this deluge, this huge number of victims, they actually turn the volume down on their fear. They turn the volume down on their response, right? Because they don't want to be overwhelmed. They get flooded. If any of you have ever done any relationship work with John Gottman's work, he talks about this concept of flooding. And it means that you basically got so overwhelmed by emotion that you shut down. So researchers have actually called this the collapse of compassion, right? And even Mother Teresa got it. She got this completely. She said, if I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will. If I look at the mass, I will never act. If I look at the one, I will. So, of course, Stalin was wrong, right? One death is a tragedy, yes, but 1 million deaths is 1 million tragedies, okay? And that goes for our social media feeds as well. So when we're talking to people, right, are we overwhelming them with these huge numbers that their brains can't relate to, that make them feel overwhelmed and despairing, right? Same on social media. Are we absolutely flooding our feeds with a constant barrage of horror, right? Because guess what? And I've noticed this with my friends. I've noticed it. I've had people do this to me. I've had people, I've noticed people doing it to other people. But when you just constantly, one horrific image after another, one massive statistic after another, what happens? People start blocking. They start unfollowing. They start unfriending. They're overwhelmed. They're feeling powerless, right? We don't want that. We want them to feel inspired. We want them to feel outraged. We want them to feel completely connected to this terrible tragedy in front of them, right? And we want to empower them. We want them to not feel powerless. We want them to say, I can do something about that. And I'm going to, right? So one powerful post every now and then with a specific call to action is going to have more impact than a never-ending stream of misery. So if we think about that tactically, if we mix up our posts, get people engaging with them, be strategic about we post, where we post it, how often we post it, we're more likely to see people engaging. Okay, so it's just something to think about. And that's also for us, for our own benefit too, right? Because we know that as activists, we're often seeing, like, for example, my friends, I'm like the one vegan that a lot of people know, right? I'm the one animal activist that a lot of people know. And so when I post, they see my posts. But for me, I know a gazillion animal activists. I know a gazillion vegans. And so I see this, my feed is full of their posts, right? And so for us activists, part of our self-care is how do we manage that flow? How do we not succumb to the overwhelm of those big numbers and that constant barrage, right? So I'm just kind of thinking about, and I don't necessarily have a solution here, but I'm thinking about how can we do this better? What can we change? How can we help people connect? And how can we do it kindly, right? So one way is we leverage the power of one. We've talked about this a little bit. Share the statistics by all means, right? There are some people who love data and they'll get caught up in it and that'll galvanize them. The majority of us need something to connect with, right? So remember Caitlin, that sweet little dog? Her story is so resonant, right? See how these pictures have got these beautiful creatures looking at you, right? That's another thing that marketers do. Marketers make connection. They use the fact that whatever they're showing, if they take pictures, for example, in marketing campaigns, you'll find the ones that actually convert the highest, the ones that drive the highest actions, are the ones where people look at a picture and they feel engaged with it. There's usually quote unquote eye contact with a person or an animal in the picture, right? Inspiring stories. That sweet little kitty who went back into a burning house and rescued every one of her kittens, right? These adorable little calves that escape rescue trucks, right? The sweet little puppy in a shelter, right? Rather than saying to people, well, there's 4 million animals a year dying in shelters. Stop, right? Say, look at this little guy. Look at him. Isn't he sweet? Right? And people start to be able to access their own empathy when we help them to relate to it, right? And so one thing that I'm thinking that might help us is if we start showcasing one or few people, one or few beings at a time, right? Telling their story, highlighting the impact of action on those specific beings, and then giving people a specific action that they themselves can take, right? So create archetypes. People do respond to archetypes. It's something that we use a lot in counseling and therapy, coaching, right? Let that one calf be the ambassador for their species. Let them represent all the babies that get ripped away from their mothers. Let them represent all the babies that get thrown away in slaughterhouses, right? Let one dog stand for all bait dogs, all bait animals, right? Let one dog stand for all the animals that are abused in home situations, right? Let one whale represent all oceanic life, right? Create really powerful archetypes and help people connect with them, trigger that empathy, help them reconnect, because they all have it in there somewhere, unless they're sociopaths or psychopaths, help them to reconnect with their fundamental humanity and compassion, right? So some other stuff to think about. How do we actually get them to take action? How do we get them to want to engage with our cause, right? Step onto the path. Come with us. Come with us. There's a great quote by Dale Carnegie in How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he says, when dealing with people, remember, you're not dealing with creatures of logic, but with creatures bristling with prejudice and motivated by pride and vanity, right? We're not dealing with creatures of logic. We think we are. And we think we are creatures of logic, which we're not, right? And as he says here, a person usually has two reasons for doing a thing: one that sounds good and the real one. And so where's that real one? We need to get to those real reasons, okay? And when we think about it, how people act, their values may motivate them, right? They may have a value of altruism or compassion or love or kindness, right? That's going to motivate them. But their actions are going to be influenced by their needs. And that is, what makes me happy? What makes me feel safe, right? A lot of people, and activists as well, I notice this as well, is as we want to, let's say, for example, we want to speak out for the animals. We have this value of compassion and this sense of justice. But we also want to be loved by our family. We want to be accepted by our peers, right? And so sometimes those needs get in the way of our values, right? And then we take an action that meets the need, and then we feel icky because we've sold out a value, right? So how do we connect back to our values? Is we connect back to our values through emotion, and emotion drives action. People do not make decisions no matter how much they create spreadsheets and pros and cons lists and all the rest of it. People don't take action on reason. They take action on emotion, how they feel. Right? Zig Ziglar said in business, people will do business with people they like and trust. So they'll work on emotion. And then what they'll do is they'll justify it. They'll find reasons to justify their actions. Right? So what we want to do is help them get in alignment so that they're not having to come up with some kind of justification and force fit it, right? They don't want to shoehorn it in. We want to help them find an alignment between their needs and their values so that the emotion is pure and authentic and that the reason is self-evident. So here's another point. People don't want to change their minds. They don't. They can't be forced or driven to agree, but they may possibly be led to if we're gentle and friendly, ever so gentle and ever so friendly. And I can tell you right now, Lisa, our facilitator here, she is a master at what we call nonviolent communication. And that's something that I think all of us could benefit from, is to learn that model of communicating in a nonviolent way. And there's actually a book called Nonviolent Communication, surprisingly, by a gentleman called, I think it's Marshall Rosenbaum, right?
Marshall Rosenberg.
Rosenberg. Great book, worth reading, and can help us rethink how we are communicating with people. So here's some food for thought. I think we've all been down this path. We've had people come up to us and evangelize to us and tell us how we need to adopt their religion or their perspective on something. And usually what happens? Why is it a cultural joke that the door-to-door evangelists, that people hide from them, right? Because it makes you feel like icky, right? So when we go out there and we become vegangelists and we're like, you should do this, people treat us the way other people treat Mormons, right? Because when it happened to us, did we decide that we were going to rethink our religion or our spirituality as a result? Probably not, right? And I can probably put money on the fact that the majority of us have had somebody unfriending us or unfollowing us or cutting us off, right? because we're so excited. We've woken up, right? We have a sense of urgency about it. We get it. There are lives at stake. There are planets at stake. We know that there's a better way. And we know that if only people would just wake up, of course they'd get it. They'd immediately convert, wouldn't they? Well, we're forgetting two things. There's a Navajo proverb that says, you can't wake a person who's pretending to sleep. And remember that needs trump values when it comes to people taking action. So if we're saying, yeah, come and join us, right? Like, this is a way to a better world. And they go, okay, and I have this need to be accepted, and I have this need to be loved and to be included in my family, and I have this need to know who I am. And you're asking me to walk away from those things. You're asking me to walk into a new world that to me feels scary and unsafe, because I may have to sacrifice things that are really important. And I may have to throw away my whole idea of who I am. Right. And I've had a lot of therapists in my time. And I remember in my 20s, I fired therapist after therapist. I would just fire them. And the reason why was because we would start getting somewhere. Right. We'd start getting somewhere. And all of a sudden I'd be like, whoa, I don't know who I am. I don't know who I am without my issues. So I'd fire them. And then, eventually I'd be like, oh, I need to change. It's the same thing with everybody else, right? We've all been, Will Tuttle says this in his book, in the World Peace Diet. He reminds us that we've been indoctrinated, not nefariously, but unconsciously. We've been indoctrinated since birth, right? So the way things are right now is deeply embedded in people's psyche. It's embedded in their ideas of who they are in society, who they are in their families, right? Who they are with their friends. And so when we say, throw that away and come and join us, we're asking them to do something really, really scary. And so how can we help them? How can we make it safe, right? Because we need to be very, very clear that our responsibility is to the animals, right? And so we need to find a way that works instead of just being righteously indignant all the time. What works? How is this righteous indignation working for me right now? How many people are coming over to the cause? And if it's not working, let's do something different. If it is working, keep doing it. Okay. But I want to say that being an evangelist, right? And I've done this with my religion. I've done this with my veganism. Being an evangelist can be a shortcut to disillusionment, right? It can be a shortcut to disillusionment. And I believe that it reinforces this concept of othering, which is ironically the very thing that we want to stop other people doing, right? We want to stop speciesism, which is a form of othering. But when we start judging people and feeling superior to them because of the choices that we've made and the evolution that we've gone through, we judge them and we other them. And that makes us judge them and makes us feel contempt for them. And the relationship research reinforces this. Contempt is one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse for a relationship, for a connection with another human being. Right? If you feel contempt for somebody else, it's going to get in the way. So it's a vicious cycle, right? We're all familiar with compassion fatigue. We're all familiar with secondary trauma. How is our communication with other people contributing to violence toward them, right? So how can we find a way where we're living our values on every level, that we're completely aligned, that when we say we support a world that is violence-free, cruelty-free, that everything we do reinforces that, right? So remember, emotions are contagious. If you're always angry and sad and horrified, people around you will feel that way too, and then they'll not want to feel that way, and so they'll move away. But if you're hopeful and forgiving and loving and very, 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 very optimistic, which, by the way, is a quality that can be learned, perhaps we can infect people with those emotions instead. So instead of marketing as missionaries Let's be marketers with a mission, right? And I'm saying marketers because activists and marketers are the same thing. We're just marketing something much, much bigger, right? So I just want to sit with that for a second. And then I want to propose a different kind of evangelism. I'm going to use the tech industry as a model here. There is actually a job called technical evangelist, and most of the big companies have them, right? We want to light the way. We want to show the path. We want to invite people to choose to step onto that path. We, animal activists, are on a mission to build critical mass, right? We're driving towards a tipping point, and it is coming. I will tell you that. It is coming. Have you noticed how many awesome new vegan products are hitting the market lately? Right? So building critical mass, reaching that tipping point. Once we do that, the momentum increases exponentially, right? And a new standard gets established. If you want to read more about that, Malcolm Gladwell writes a book called The Tipping Point. And very much around this, you build that critical mass, you hit that tipping point, and all of a sudden, whoosh, the floodgates open, right? So tech evangelists do this. They build a critical mass of support, usually for technology, right? Then they establish that technology as the standard, right? Look at iPhones, right? Look at Windows, look at Google. They do that by showcasing potential. So they demonstrate the possibility. If you've ever been to a big tech keynote, they tell these stories and they bring you into this beautiful new world, and you're so caught up that you absolutely you must have this new world, right? You must have that new piece of technology because it's going to make life so awesome. They invite you in, right? They foster your enthusiasm. They demonstrate. And by doing that, they plant seeds. And so what we want to do is take a leaf from the Tech Evangelist playbook. How can we provide experiences for people that will give them that opportunity to see the potential? Well, first of all, you are the best demo, the best product demo for a brave new world of compassion and empathy and kindness and veganism. You're the best demo that you could possibly have. So be a role model. You're a role model. Demonstrate that new compassionate world, because make no mistake, people are watching. People watch you. Other suggestions could be, cook great vegan food. Invite people to come out and eat with you at awesome vegan restaurants, right? Wear stylish vegan clothes and accessories, right? Showcase stuff that people want. People want to be stylish. They want to eat yummy stuff, right? Suggest amazing cruelty-free entertainment, right? Not necessarily as a judgy kind of thing, but hey, here's this new thing. Let's go do this. Let's experience this. Take them shopping with you. I have a client right now who's so excited to take a friend of hers shopping and help her make great vegan choices, right? Because people are absolutely uninformed and they're facing their own barrage of marketing, right? Remember, the big industries are marketing at them relentlessly. So take them shopping, have them show them that they can easily do this. That it's not a big problem for them. That they don't have to completely rewire their entire life. And wherever possible, provide opportunities for people to make a personal connection with an animal, right? Ideally in person, but if not, then through stories and images. Because people connect with that. They connect with experiences. Help them experience something positive. Experience great food. Experience great fashion. Experience great entertainment, right? Experience connection, right? When you're telling stories, show animals demonstrating these beautiful qualities. Do not be afraid to anthropomorphize either. Okay, remember, the greater the emotional resonance and empathy, the harder it is to other. I can't tell you how many people Esther the Wonder Pig has converted to at least vegetarianism, if not veganism, because she's completely reframed people's opinion of quote unquote livestock, right? So remember that. Remember, emotions are contagious. People connect with emotion, and people connect with emotions that are similar to theirs. So help them do that. Help them, right? I'm going to finish up with a couple of do's and don'ts or stops and starts, right? We're planting seeds. Remember that marketing is different from sales in that marketing plants seeds. Marketing talks to perceptions, it talks to values, right? Sales converts, sales drives the actual conversion, right? But we want to plant seeds. We want to keep doing that everywhere we can. So let's start empathizing a little bit more rather than bashing people over the head. Let's stop overwhelming people with statistics and endless feeds of misery. Let's start empowering them instead by giving them action items, specific things that they can do, right? Instead of alienating them, connect. Instead of demanding that they change, invite them in, right? Invite them in. This is a great place that we live, right? Come and join us. It's fabulous, right? Support them in that. Remember that you're asking them to completely redefine who they are. You're asking them to fly in the face of friends, family, convention, society, right? So help them do that. Help them. Make it safe for them, right? Allow them to take those baby steps towards us that then will escalate into running, right? Let's stop reacting to everything we see and let's be strategic about how we respond. Let's think about how does this response serve the animals, right? Let's be consciously contagious. Let's be that beacon of positivity and health and kindness and compassion that we're asking everybody else to become. So with that, I'm going to say to you, take action, right? Take action. And when stuff's not working, try something different. There are a couple of resources here. I could mention a gazillion more. So always feel free to connect with me and ask me if there's anything. I've got a massive library of books and I've got a huge favorites list on my computer, right? That How to Be Great at Doing Good book talks a lot to this. What is our strategic impact, right? There are a couple of other talks that have been done for IDA that I just thought were fabulous and also very relevant. Particularly Ray's webinar on despair repair. She talks about us as the CEOs, we're the board, right? So instead of just because we're a small number doesn't mean that we should feel powerless, we should feel more powerful, right? So, and there's a couple of videos there about empathy and disagreement. And I'm sure that, if you download the slides, you'll have them. And again, also feel free to reach out to me. There's my contact information, my email address, my website, my Facebook page. So I'm done with my slides. And I'd love to open up for questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lorrin. I'm going to turn my little webcam on and maybe we'll have you there too. I don't know. But I really appreciate what you shared tonight. That was very motivating and super interesting. So thank you for the slides and all the resources that you shared with us. And just wanted to offer, if anyone has any questions, you can either type them into the chat box and Lorrin can check them out from there. Or if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can ask your question. It is about 6 o'clock, so I just want to let folks know who are planning for an hour. We may go a few minutes over just to answer some questions. But I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. It was a wonderful, very helpful presentation that Lorrin gave us. Thank you. So for now, I'm going to switch the format so that we can go into our Q&A mode and anyone who has questions can ask them. You may hear a little recording.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
Great. So as the recording says, if you're on your phone, you can press *6 if you'd like to ask a question of Lorrin. And if you're on your computer, next to your name, if you can see your name, there's a little microphone that you can click, and that will unmute you so that you can actually ask your questions. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them or to ask them in the chat box. Let's see. So we have a few things in the chat box, just mentioning people saying thank you, special thanks to Lorrin, and also veganstrategist.org was mentioned, and it's a blog, and actually
that Marshall Rosenberg,
bias.
Also the Heart of Social Change. Thanks, Christine, for mentioning that. The Heart of Social Change, how to make a difference in your world.
That's excellent. And we, the Vegan Strategist blog, this by Tobias Langhart, and he's going to be one of our, leading one of our webinars in the next few months. So stay tuned for that. And it looks like Bobby was mentioning he would love, oops, excuse me. Wait, let me go back to that. There's a few questions popping up here, so I don't know, you might want to check these out too, Lorrin. So Bobby's mentioning, when will this be ready again? Yes. So for everyone, I will be posting a replay that depends on whether or not we need editing. I can post it within the next week or so. I will send it to everyone who registered. You will definitely get an email with all of Lorrin's references and all of her resources that she mentioned tonight, and then you'll get the replay link as well. So thanks for that question. And the chat, that's a good question. I haven't seen the chat on the webinar replay links, but there may be a way to get that. I'll inquire about that. And let's see. So Ginger had two questions, although both of them were addressed.
Okay, but then what are the best ways of approaching adult learners when offering them the opportunity to make radical, extreme changes? That's a great question. And I find that adult learners tend to be, first of all, they're very affiliative. So they like to learn in context of other people around them. They tend to learn better. Like I know a lot of executives, for example, they tend to learn better if they have colleagues or coaches or mentors or, their senior managers. So having other people mentor them or coach them or share information with them, that kind of that affiliative, that social support is very important to adult learners. And then also experiential learning is really important to adult learners. It's giving them an option of experiencing something different. So actually kind of looking at addressing change, not just on kind of a logical linguistic level, but looking at it on a holistic, somatic, emotional, kinesthetic, and logical level. So that's what I've found with my coaching and also with the corporate training that I do is those two things play a big part. We try and make our workshops as experiential as possible. We try and address the different styles, right? So also understanding how somebody communicates. If an adult learner prefers to get a lot of data, give them a lot of data. But if they don't, if they're big picture, broad brush people, tell them big stories, right? So it's kind of watching to see what their preferred style is. And your second question was, how can an educator avoid the intrusion of personal anger and bitterness into the presentation of adult education opportunities for change and growth? Isn't that like one of our biggest challenges, right? As activists, as communicators, as educators. How about, there's a lot of different things that we can try, but sometimes how about just stopping and making contact? And when I say that, I mean it in a Gestalt sense. So I'm meaning really looking at the people, right? Really looking at them from your heart. Trying to find something that you have in common with them so that you can make a connection. Part of it for me is, just I have to, first of all, get very grounded in myself. So get very grounded, get very take some deep breaths, take some time to close your eyes before you go in. Close your eyes and just think about the why. There's actually a great book for nonprofits on fundraising called The Ask. And it talks about this, how people feel really uncomfortable asking for money, right? And part of how they take their ego out of it, which is where this anger and bitterness comes in, is it's part of our ego that's getting in the way. What they suggest to do is just really spend some time meditating on the bigger picture. Think about why we're doing this. Think about what we're trying to accomplish, right? Because when you're talking to somebody about, changing the world and bringing a new world order to bear, it's a lot easier to then ask them to step up than it is if you're saying, and can you give me some money, right? So I think that concept can apply to the education sector in terms of, okay, you're really making me angry and I'm bitter because I see what you people do, right? What was that old quote? Look to the helpers, right? Look for the qualities of good. Look for the qualities in that other human being of good, and cultivate hope. And it's a conscious choice, honestly. I mean, there are times that I'm just like, I can be as misanthropic as the rest of the world, right? I'm like, I hate human beings, they're a virus. Then I go away and I find stories of where human beings have done amazing things for animals. I go in and I find stories, I look for them, stories of where people have loved and cared for and saved and all of the rest of it, right? And then that reinforces my faith in humanity again, right? And I remind myself that not everybody is bad. Not everybody, a lot of people are just unconscious. And so if I can find that compassion in myself for them, it helps me not be so bitter. I hope that was helpful. It's just my perspective.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's definitely helpful. Another thing that you can do if you're presenting is to we can really only control ourselves or manage our own feelings. So being able to take a deep breath and then offer some compassion to ourselves, and even letting that angry part of us know, I'm going to really listen to you later. After this is done, I'm going to really listen to you. So that as if we had an angry child by our side, we may not have the bandwidth at that very moment to really deal with everything going on. So we can tell them, I'm going to let you express everything you need to tell me after we're done with this. So that's one way. And then also just to imagine yourself having enough, being able to create enough space to have all of it there, the feelings of anger and also the feelings of compassion and the feelings of productivity and being an effective communicator, so that you can make enough room for all of it at the same time. So I think that those are two different strategies. One, putting the emotions on the side after acknowledging them, and the other one is to make enough room for all of it. And then I think those are two additional ways to manage our own feelings in the moment.
Thanks, Lisa. And Christine's making a good point too here, is appeal to stuff that's important to them as well. Remind them of all the great things about our world, right? That we're healthy, we live longer, we're cleaner. It's just a better, funner, like nicer way to be, right? Yeah. And also, oh, by the way, I'll just add this one thing. My coach does this. She actually has a jolly great big foam cube, right? And so I find that ways to get my anger out. So she has this foam cube and a big tennis racket, and she'll go into her horse arena and she will beat the snot out of that big cube, and she'll yell and scream and then it's done, right? It's out. And so I actually do the same, but I have a slightly more earthy approach because my horse she poos. And so I put on a pair of gloves and I go out and I pick up poo and I fling it and I yell and I'm like, I'm so angry. I can't stand it. And the harder I can fling it and the more I can get my whole body into it, the better it is, because I get tired and I get it all out. And then whew, then I'm done and I don't feel angry anymore. So if there's some way that you can find to really get your body into expressing that anger, like go for a run, go to the gym, take up boxing, fling poo, whatever works for you. Find that way. Yeah.
Those are great suggestions, and I have to admit, I haven't heard the flinging poo one before. that works.
I figured it works for chimpanzees. It can work for me.
Yeah, there's a cathartic release that happens when we allow ourselves to move that energy out of our body, so that we can go on and continue to do our good work. Right. So thank you so much for answering all of these questions, Lorrin. I think this has been a great session, and we've had some engagement in the chat box for those of you who are on the phone, and also just having an opportunity to really talk about what are the issues that we face as activists. We're trying to communicate this message of compassion. So thank you very much, Lorrin. Just checking if there's anything else. Any other questions before we do our final closing?
Thank you so much, everybody. You've made some really good points, and I love to connect with you. So, and thanks, Lisa, so much for this opportunity. It's been a lot of fun. And I'm sorry my video is not working.
Oh, I know. We're so sad, but it's just the way it goes with technology, and we certainly had your whole presentation up here, and we had your voice the entire time, so we're very grateful for that. And thank you so much for taking the time to put this together for us and to share your business knowledge with us in ways that we can now relate as marketers ourselves, because we're our activist marketers trying to persuade the world about the value of compassion. So thank you so much, Lorrin. And I'll do a little plug here for someone that our next Sustainable Activism webinar is going to be with someone that Lorrin knows quite well. Her name is Joan Ranquet. She's an animal communicator, energy healer, and author, and she's going to talk about what we call the poor baby syndrome. And this is a way to kind of reframe how we look and how we communicate about the animals, so that we keep them in a place of light and a place of healing and health. So to use our empathy in a way that helps us to really liberate and advocate for the animals. So if you're curious to learn more about what is the poor baby syndrome, then stay tuned for our next Sustainable Activism webinar with Joan Ranquet. So meanwhile, I hope you have a wonderful month, and I hope that your advocacy continues to shine bright lights in the world. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, and especially Lorrin for spending this time with us. So many thanks to everyone, and you'll receive the replay sometime the next week or so. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Oh.